Hi! In this video we'll go through the best force feedback settings for EA WRC with any steering wheel and the specific settings on the Fanatec GT DT Pro. The wheel settings should apply to most if not all Fanatecs, and even the in-game settings can be adapted to other racing games as well. EA WRC has about 10 adjustments for the force feedback effects, and the Fanatec GT itself has 7. EA doesn't really provide any descriptions on what exactly each setting does, but with Fanatec you'll get good descriptions on its settings once you turn into the user manual, which I recommend you to do if you own a Fanatec. Still, together they are quite an ordeal to a gamer who might not be previously familiar with the intricate functions of a direct drive wheel, or even any wheel or in-game force feedback settings. So it's no surprise that people keep asking what kinds of settings they should use. Let me help you with that. But here's the thing. I have tried the personal settings of a few notable sim racers, and as I suspected, they didn't work for me at all. I felt like the force feedback focused on information that was unnecessary, and on the other hand, I didn't get the important parts clearly enough. The settings are indeed very personal. I don't use the same shoes as them either, I assume. That's why the adjustments exist in the first place. Likewise, if I would just present a column of numbers right here, it might not work all that well for you either. So let's get around that. What I can't get around though is that this is a learning process. I'll make it as simple and as fast as I possibly can, but without taking the 20 minutes of your time and effort, you may be missing out a lot of your wheel's potential. Methological setup. My method is to narrow the settings down to the most important ones, test them individually to learn what they do, and create a mix from there. In our case, the EA WRC has only 2 important force feedback adjustments, and the rest play a much smaller role. That already makes things so much easier. Here's what I suggest you do. On the Fanatec, dedicate one of the 5 sets for testing purposes and set it to 500 or whatever rotation you wish to have. 100, linear, 3, 30, 6, 1, 100, 100, 100, and 100. I'll go through these settings in detail later on. This is just to have a reasonable baseline. Then in EA WRC, set the soft lock to off, self-aligning torque to 50 and the next 6 sliders to 0. Self-aligning torque includes information for weight transfer, camber effects, road surface, and so on. Now go for a drive. I suggest starting on gravel, for example a time trial with a 4-wheel drive car in stage 11 or 12 in Chile or number 3 in Finland. If you at any point feel like the force feedback is too weak or too strong, pause the race and adjust the self-aligning torque to your liking. Just remember that you'll need to be able to race for much longer than a few minutes. And make sure you can steer with one hand only for a bit, especially if you're using a shifter or a physical handbrake. Get a feel of what the force feedback does and what it is that it tries to inform you about. Once you've driven for closer to a minute without adjusting the self-aligning torque, you've already got the main force feedback component dialed in. Write down the value, turn the self-aligning torque to 0, turn up the suspension to 100 and restart the same stage. Same thing, assess the information and adjust to taste as you drive. Include some jumps or rough terrain here. This time 30 seconds without adjusting is enough. Write the value down, zero the suspension, and do it once more with the tire slip, going 15 seconds without adjusting this time. Note that the tire slip only shakes the wheel when the rear tires are sliding. Now you know exactly what the core adjustments do, so the hard work has already been done. Set the self-aligning torque, suspension and tire slip to your preferred values and go for a drive. Fine-tune each of them if needed. The rest of the adjustments from most to least important. Feel free to repeat the procedure for these as well if you wish to know them better. Tire friction tries to inform you about the surface grip, but I don't think it's made particularly well. Going higher than 10 gets unnaturally stiff quite soon, as if the power steering was broken. I don't recommend setting it above 12. Wheel friction adds a static friction to the steering wheel. It works somewhat in conjunction with tire friction and self-aligning torque to portray understeering, but it's quite grainy and not at all smooth. Therefore, I don't recommend setting it above 12 either. Engine only rumbles when you're revving on neutral gear. I have mine at 40. Steering center force is the force that centers the wheel only when resetting the track mid-race. I have mine at 20 so that it won't chew my fingers out. Collision should add to the immersion and feeling of danger when hitting something, but it doesn't do anything in my system. Then the Fanatec settings. You don't need to be racing to adjust these. Start with the damping, friction and inertia at 0. Yank the wheel left and right, both fast and slow, and get a feeling of the steering speed and weight. Then set the inertia to around 50 and notice how it already feels like an actual heavy physical steering wheel. Adjust to taste on the fly, then set the friction to 60. Yank the wheel some more to notice that the steering now feels almost like it's actually moving something mechanical. In addition, the pushing and pulling of the wheel base's motor magnets are now less apparent. Lastly, add damping if you want to add further weight to fast steering inputs. Interpolation filtering smoothens out rapid movements, so at 0 it can feel like sand in the steering axle, but 20 will blur the fastest movements with less fast ones. I prefer 1 or 2. Now go for a drive and adjust the Fanatec settings to your liking. And now you're done. You have found the best force feedback settings for yourself on your system. If you want to compare the Fanatec's linear and peak modes, copy the settings to another set and set the new strength at 83 and scale as peak. Now you can drive and switch between the two sets to compare them on the fly. Fanatec themselves say that linear improves the game output and torque output linearity, and to me it also feels a bit more logical. In the beginning, I asked you to set the soft lock to off. This was to have the same steering rotation and force feedback feel in all cars. If you want them to change automatically for each car, set soft lock to on and adjust the Fanatec sensitivity to the maximum rotation you wish to have, be it 500, 900 or whatever you wish. Despite what I said earlier, here are my current settings. Feel free to try them out, but they are not recommendations. They are simply what works for me, and they may as well still change, even drastically. Thanks for watching and happy racing!